This video was produced by the MBRRACE UK Perinatal team at the University of Leicester, commissioned by the Healthcare Quality Improvement Partnership. It is to accompany the MBRRACE UK Perinatal Surveillance Report for births in 2013. I'm going to describe how the mortality rates given in the report were calculated. The technical details of the analyses won't be described in this video. Instead, the motivation and consequences of the chosen methodology will be outlined. The technical details will be set out in a future publication. In the MBRRACE UK Perinatal Surveillance Report, stillbirth, neonatal and extended perinatal mortality rates are given for various organisations responsible for maternity and neonatal care in the United Kingdom and the Crown Dependencies. These rates are reported using both maps and tables. In order to try to ensure that rates are comparable across different organisations, all terminations of pregnancy have been excluded from the calculation of rates, along with any births at less than 24 weeks gestational age. In this video, extended perinatal mortality rates are shown as the example and are given for organisations responsible for commissioning care in their area. The mortality rates are shown as both crude rates and as stabilised and adjusted rates. These will be described in the rest of this video. Crude mortality rates are simply the number of deaths which occurred for an organisation for every 1,000 births. They are given as a rate per 1,000 births and are a snapshot of the mortality for each organisation. In this case, the crude extended perinatal mortality rates ranged from 0, where no deaths occurred, to over 12 deaths per 1,000 total births. Although the crude mortality rates are useful as a snapshot of the outcomes for any organisation, there are two reasons why they might not be a reliable measure of the underlying or long-term mortality rate. The first reason is that mortality rates will vary from year to year purely due to random variation. This is particularly true for organisations that have a small number of births. This can be seen in our data, when the rates are shown by the number of total births for each organisation. The rates for the smaller organisations, those to the left of the scatter plot, show much more variation than the bigger organisations. In order to allow for this, we have used statistical methods which take into account the number of deaths in each organisation and consequently the strength of evidence that the underlying rate for each organisation is different from the national average. We have called this process stabilisation. The result of this is that the estimated stabilised mortality rates will be closer to the national average than will the crude rates. This is especially true for organisations with a small number of births, as for these there is very little evidence that any extreme value for the crude rate is anything other than a chance finding. This approach prevents small organisations from being falsely identified as having high rates of mortality. The second reason that the crude mortality rate might not be a reliable measure of an organisation's underlying or long-term mortality rate is that the organisation might serve a population with inherent high risks of poor outcomes. In our analysis, we have taken into account factors which are associated with a high risk of poor perinatal outcome and for which information is available for all births. These factors were the mother's age, socio-economic deprivation, the baby's ethnicity, the baby's sex, and whether it was a multiple pregnancy. Also, for neonatal death, the gestational age of the baby at birth was also taken into account. It can be seen that this resulted in some changes to the values of the estimated mortality rates. We refer to this as risk adjustment and to the resulting mortality rates as stabilised and adjusted rates. The consequence of risk adjustment on the mortality rates can perhaps be seen more clearly if we reduce the range of the vertical axis. Finally, the organisations were colour-coded according to the value of their mortality rate. Those with rates above the UK average were coloured amber, or red if their rate was more than 10% higher than the UK average, while those below the UK average were coloured yellow, or green if their rate was more than 10% lower than the UK average. These colours are presented in the maps and tables in the report. To find out more about the report, you can access both the full report and the latest summary at this website. Thank you for watching.